It's time for a Game Boy Color overhaul. Hi and welcome back to the shed. I'm Joe Bleeps and today I'm going to be taking this Game Boy Color and upgrading it with the latest Q5 IPS V2 screen. These screen names are real mouthful, aren't they? And we're going to try and get the aesthetic to echo the original Game Boy as well, so that should be pretty good fun. Let's get straight into it. Okay, so this is the Game Boy Color we're going to be using. It's a little bit tatty on the shell and the screen, but it's all working perfectly. I've put a little bit of time into improving the power switch recently that was faulty. There's a separate video to show you how I did that. Also, I've installed a noise filter capacitor inside just to improve the quality of the sound once it's all completed. But other than that, it's a standard stock Game Boy Color, and what we're going to do is upgrade by improving the screen with a backlit screen and put a new shell on there with new buttons and just make it feel nice and fresh. So it really doesn't feel like long ago that we were quite limited in terms of the modifications available for the Game Boy Color screen, and we had to get really creative with the mods that we did, and I always enjoy that sort of thing within the community, and this is one of my favourite Game Boy Colors that I've built pre-IPS, if we want to call it that. So I got matching colour buttons, Pro Sound stereo line out, bass boost capacitor mod, glass screen, and the thing I wanted to show you was that I've got a front lit screen. So it works, it's completely playable. I did if I do say so myself, an excellent job of this one. I trimmed and cut the screen down. They were really prone to fingerprints and marks and scratches and dust, and this one is absolutely perfect. It works really well. If you look straight down from the top, you can see where the panel is lit from. It was nice and it was a great compromise and it was totally usable, but now in this day and age where we've got new IPS screens coming out seemingly every few weeks, it's time to explore what is possible with a modern one. So let's switch this one off and see what we can do. So in addition to the capacitor that I've already installed in here, I got a whole bundle of stuff from Z Labs this week to modify my Game Boy Color. Button set, the new IPS screen with the light up logo and all the other cool stuff. We'll see more of that in a bit. A new silicone, what they call membrane, got there in the end. Silicone membrane set and a shell. Now the shell's important because for this particular IPS kit, the amount of cutting and modifying needed for the original shell is just too much like hard work, and it's very, very difficult to get everything lined up right. Thankfully, FunnyPlaying, who make the screen, also make a specific shell that's all cut out to fit that, so that should help us a little bit. I've heard that the start and select holes are a little bit small, so we might do a little bit of modifying, but certainly easier than it would have been trying to modify the original shell. And I got a sticker as well. So that's all the gear. First job, let's open all this up. Let's start with a peep at the shell. So we've got the front and the back, and we've got screws. The little panel for the infrared link up is actually very dark clear purple, which is brilliant, like the original, instead of sometimes on repro shells where you get a solid black plastic, so that's a good sign. The shell itself, the back is pretty much as normal. The battery cover is a nice neat fit. Doesn't appear to be a sticker for the back, which isn't a deal breaker, but I think it helps add to the authenticity a little bit sometimes. In terms of the front shell, the mold quality looks good, the logo's good, it's nice and neat. Select start looks okay, everything looks good, and the section here you can see is significantly different to what the original one's like. Next, the silicone buttons, largely so we can look at the start and select, because I have heard that these can be a little bit difficult to fit. So I'll push that in place there. They come through. I don't know, I think that feels okay. Well, there's a good start. I pretty much bought this entire set just to get the grey start and select, to get it more like the original Game Boy. Now I've got them, the grey is actually quite a bit lighter than I expected, but we'll see how it goes. It looks kind of right for the Game Boy. In terms of the buttons, this set has got the black D-pad and the classic, what do they call it, wine red buttons or something like that. So we'll pop those in. Those in there, like that. There we go. Okay, already I'm excited. That is looking so cool, and I'm really impressed with the quality of the plastic and the moulding and everything else. It does look great. Oh, I'm so excited about this project. This sort of stuff is what was completely unheard of in terms of just a swap-in solution when we were trying to figure out how to do all these front lights. The general consensus was it's impossible to do backlights, so
You know, that's because I've been into Game Boy modding for ages. This sort of stuff is super exciting. It's nice that this gets supplied with all the wires that we need. So in terms of solder points, this ribbon has 4. There's start and select, which is unsurprisingly to wire up your start and select buttons on the Game Boy. And on the other side, there's also PWR for the power and TCH, which is for the little touch sensor, which is this separate little bit here. The screen itself is layered with the glass cover already. So you do not have that whole thing of, first of all, trying to line up and center your screen to match the cover. Also, you don't get the dust in between. And I've been modding Game Boys for years, and I think probably about 3 years solid of that have been spent trying to get dust out of the gaps between screens. So this is exciting. Let's see if we can get this in place. It'll sort of drop in and should just sit neatly in place there. And that is really nice. And this is done in the style of the original DMG dot matrix with stereo sound and the blue and pink stripes. It's just got that aesthetic in there. I think it's going to look brilliant when everything's all together. Time to commence the build. Let's just separate all this out, get all the packaging out of the way, and we'll get started. Right, next job is to remove the motherboard from the original Game Boy. So we just need to take the battery cover off and remove the 6 tri-wing screws. Right, when we're at that point, there's a couple of things we need to do. There's 3 screws here. They are crosshead screws. Now these are shorter than the main shell screws, so careful when you're putting these back together that you don't get that mixed up. Also at the top here, we've got like 2 little plastic tabs. They just need moving up, so I'll get 2 spudges there and just nudge those up. You can use your fingernails for that if you like. But if you've got the right tools, use them. It's just stuck on the plastic there. Might have been from when I had my heat gun on it. That lifts out, the screen comes off. Now we don't actually need any of this at the moment. I might fall back on the silicone buttons in black. We'll have a look at how they look later. All of this could just pop to one side and be kept for another project. So this is the bit we're concerned with. This is just the motherboard. The speaker is a little bit dirty on there, so I'm going to clean that. I'm going to make sure that my contacts on here are all clean while I've got it open. Just a little bit of alcohol to rub down on those. The start and select are a little bit grubby, so while it's open I may as well do that. And also the cartridge slot, it's rare that you get such access to the cartridge slot, so I'm just going to give that a little bit of a clean out as well. Okay, so we are good to go. Now, there is some soldering to do, as mentioned before. On the ribbon there are 4 contact points. They will connect to the power switch. They'll also connect to the start and select connections. And what was the other thing? The little touch thingy. So we've got 4 wires to set up. My soldering iron is already warmed up. We are provided with some wires to use already. I did do a little bit of research before starting this project. So let's take a look at this diagram I put together. With a view to it helping me. Now this was without looking inside the Game Boy, this was looking at other guides online, and the main points are on the power switch. There are little separate labelled 1, 2, 3 and this little C in the middle. That is where we attach the power connection. So on the ribbon there on the back where we've got the little power bit, that's what connects up to there. Obviously the touch bit just connects to the other bit. So in terms of start and select, rather than wire up to the flat area here, if you look up at the top there, my diagram kind of routes me towards a little cluster of 4 dots. So that is, I'm looking for the little CPU 03 bit with this kind of panel there. This little bit is what we're looking for. So my diagram was just like, there's the general area, there's the bit where that comes up to the side, this little cluster of 4, and it's just the 2 to the left. The top one is the start and the bottom one is select. So I'm going to need to prepare those 2 points by adding some solder. I'm going to need to prepare the switch by adding a little bit of solder to that too, and then we can start getting some wires in place. So we've got these 2 points and we've got to try and warm them up. Did not want to stick there, even with the flux on there. Just got to be patient, as with all these things. Keep the heat on there. There you go, we're all right there. So on the back, where we've got these points, we're looking for the one marked C. It's already got solder attached, but a little bit more won't do any harm when it comes to trying to attach the other wire. So I'll just heat that, melt it on. That's stuck on there. There's also like little self-adhesive strips to hold the screen in position just along these two bits. But first we've got to get this stuck on in the middle. All right, there's a longer strip as well. I wonder what that's for. All right there, push out any air bubbles. So here we've got like these little self-adhesive strips. So I'll try and, oh man, I picked the wrong day to cut my fingernails. Okay, so struggling to get the self-adhesive strip off with my newly trimmed fingernails. I will carefully use a knife. I don't want to scratch the back of the lens. Just peel that one back there. And this one here, that will peel off there. Obviously, when we're feeding it through the gap, we've got to watch out for the little connector there, so that will feed through. It's like a little bit of a wiggle required to get this in place because it feeds through there and then it slots down in place here, and then it should just sit in place. When I did the test fit before, it was a perfect fit, so I'm not really going to have any issues in terms of trying to get it aligned. Everything is pretty much spot on there, and I'm going to leave the protective cover on there because it doesn't seem to be trapped in any gaps. And that's my front all sorted. This part will fold over to attach to the ribbon, which we're going to start looking into next, I think. Now, I always hate these bits. Time to put my glasses on, I think. There's like this little tiny connector on the ribbon. Now, the whole time you need to be super cautious of the ribbon because I have damaged these in the past when I've been careless, so worth taking your time. And then these 2 points, the connector there and there, need to align and push together. Maybe it'll be easier if I hold that flat and bring it over, push it down. It's one of those, you're never quite sure if you've got it right, but then when it's in, it's like, oh yeah, that's right, that's okay. I'm going to get a little bit of capped on tape. So it's not like down really secure or anything, it just holds it in place, keeps everything lined up neatly. Seems like it should be okay, everything fits really well. And obviously this is going to end up with the motherboard going in, so it's the sort of thing I would always forget, so I'll put all my buttons in place while I remember. So on here I've got these 2 points. I think a little bit of flux will be in order there. Just put a little bit of some solder. Start. So the soldering for this is really simple. Just melt a little blob onto the surface and line up the wire, heat it, hold it steady, and that'll be secured in place. Okay, so if we remember, the start, select wires are going to get connected to this point here. Start was our upper one, select was our lower one. So the start wire will go on here. And the select wire here. Just have a quick visual on those 2. Appear to be in the right place, not shorting out with any other holes, so that's okay. I am curious where this other strip's supposed to go. Maybe that's to hold this down where I put that. That makes some sense. I'll look it up later. So obviously the motherboard is going to flip over and go face down against all of this. I'm just going to get everything in position here. Thankfully, with those wires being quite long, I can move this around really easily without causing any problems. The only thing I am slightly concerned about is everything fitting in when I'm closing up. I don't want the wires going over the connections or anything like that, you know, like here. So I've got to watch out for that when they're going in place. But for now, I'll just lay it down a little further away from it because it's going to be positioned there, a little further away, so I can bring the ribbon up and over and just nudge that into position. And then in fact, I'll rotate it this way. These ribbons are expensive and delicate, so definitely don't want to damage those. Just pinch those 2 connectors down That'll grip the ribbon in place, just make sure everything seems to be lined up. And again, we've got 2 solder points, so just a little tiny bit of flux because the solder goes on these ribbons really easily. Just here and here. Got my solder, so we'll warm it, melt some solder, and here, add a little bit. So that's for the touch panel. So once the ribbon is in place and we've got these 2 bits soldered, I can move it up and try to start with the speaker, and then I'm going to rotate it around a little bit just to make sure those other wires aren't causing me any issues. They don't seem to be getting in the way of any of the controls, but it is slightly overlapping the LED there, the power LED, so I'll just push those in a little bit. They're very, very thin wires, so they're not likely to cause us any problems, but it's still better off planning ahead with these things. So get that in place there. Just move the motherboard down onto the little plastic bit there, which was a snug fit when we were removing it, if you remember. And the LED in place, down onto our ribbon. Everything seems to be okay. So now it's time to put the screws in. I have got a new set of screws, but I think, provided they are about the same size, which they seem to be, generally better to use the original screws if you can. Now, because you're going into fresh plastic, a careful approach is wise, because you're putting a new thread in. So in and out repeatedly, just like a little wiggle, left, right, left, or right, left, right, actually. And, you know, don't over tighten it. Just nip it up so that it's held in place. As soon as you feel any resistance, stop, because if you push, you might end up with bumps on the front of the console that will remind you forever of your impatience and incompetence. Well, that's what happens to me anyway. That's all held securely in place now, and the whole assembly feels nice and solid. Motherboard all fits well. So next we've got a couple more bits of soldering to do. Power switch first. So that's connecting up to the point marked C, and then to power on here, which is over there. So it won't reach all the way up and around, so I'll go just pretty much diagonally. It's there. Yeah, it won't quite reach around there, so it's going to just have to sit flat on there. I don't think it's going to cause a problem in terms of going back together though. We don't want it to touch one too much. Right, let's see, where is that? So that's here. Where is that going to go? Is that going to sit on top of here? That looks about right, you know. So I think that this is there just to provide a little bit of support for the... That makes sense, doesn't it? I think that works. So if we get on the touch panel... Oh, I can never pick these up. On the back there, there's a little exposed bit, which I think is going to be just simply connecting onto there like that. We'll give that a try and see. All right, so this has like a little tiny copper bit on one side and plain on the other. It's copper on both sides there, so I think that's probably the touch bit to face upwards, which means it's going to attach there. A little bit of flux, tiny bit of fresh solder. I don't know whether this side's going to be better or the back, but we will soon find out. And boy, is it difficult to pick up. Okay, so if I line up here, just reheat that, watching out for the other wire. That's in place there now. I mean, this is just, you know, what I suspect is right. So that bit will go in there like that. This will be pushed up to the top. Now that kind of holds it up in place there. The bit of the ribbon, because it's attached here, does tend to push it up to the top. It seems to fit really flat and quite neatly there, so I don't think that's going to really cause us much in the way of a problem. What have we got next? So I've got my power switch. That needs to just slot in this way up here, and the infrared window will, oh, I can never remember which way around these go. So it's the sort of thicker side faces down. That's going to go in this way and push in position, and it does actually lodge in place quite neatly. So that sits neatly there. Now before, that touch bit on the last Game Boy I did with an IPS, that had to be located here, which blocked the infrared and UV lights, which kind of means you can't use the trade-in feature on Pokemon and things like that. So this keeps it more functional, which is pretty good. Now everything fits all right in place, so we're all right to push that back together and get the screws in. So again, these are fresh screws. So although, what have we got? Here we go. This time, because my old screws are a little bit tarnished, I think I might use the fresh screws, but again, it's fresh screw posts. So you need to make sure that when you are putting the screws in, you do that kind of threading action with the little clockwise, anti-clockwise motion. So you start screwing in gently. As soon as it feels like it's cutting, in, out, in, and you keep repeating that movement until you're met with the slightest bit of resistance. Next screw. Oh, look at that. Right, with the buttons in place and the screen on there, it really does look the part. Oh, that's so cool. Right, batteries. Moment of truth. Maybe getting a little bit excited ahead of time here. Let's see. Power button. Oh, wow. This is awesome. Obviously it's bigger, like the size of the display. If I just take the game out of that one and switch the 2 on, not only the brightness, but this is a bigger display. I mean, look at that, it's night and day. Now, there are some features on here that I can't remember, but if you remember, we did get the little touch sensor on top. So when I tap that, there we go, that's working perfectly. So we've got dim, brighter, brighter, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we've got all those different levels. And if you've got it on a dim setting and we switch off and then back on again, it will keep those settings. If we go to one of the brighter settings, switch off, it'll remember that too, which is really cool little feature. And what was the other thing? I think if you've got the display here where it's just like the solid standard one, I think if you press and hold on there, it swaps, there you go, to the, I'll tell you what, let's get this protective cover on and see it in all its glory. So that swaps to like the pixel display, which is more like the original. That again is just going to change the brightness if we tap, but if we do the long press, it swaps between the different display modes. So there's the standard and the pixel. Well, that's like scan lines, like vertical scan lines, and then it'll swap to, I'm never quite sure if I'm in the right place with this. Let's see. Finer scan lines, a little darker there. I quite like the pixels like that. I think that looks pretty good, and the solid one looks nice as well. Now, that brings us on to the colour bit, because we're going for the authentic DMG look here, and the red logo doesn't really look quite right. I am sure I've got a DMG shell somewhere around here so we can compare. Here we go, I knew I'd have one. So this is what we are emulating, and the original logo was in blue, so we might need to cycle through and find the ideal colour for that. And that's something to do with the start and select, he says confidently. It was something to do with you press and hold those. Are my start and select actually doing anything? Ah, there we go. Right, okay. So I remember now from the instructions I saw elsewhere. Look, see where it's got game lit up, and then you press and hold them for a little longer, and it goes back to the original. So go like that, and it's got game. So we've got the Game Boy Color. Okay, that is cool. That cycles through the different colours. So we want to try, because I've got it on the main screen with Game Boy there, I'm going to keep trying to get it to match the blue at the top. I think the closest we're going to get is that one. That looks just about right for this. And then what are my other settings then? So I can go back to game, and that will, what will that do? Let's see. Oh, that moves it. Start moves it down, and select moves it up. So even if you're not that happy with how it's positioned, you can get it just right there. And then, so if we tap it again and it goes to the middle one, that's going to be the horizontal alignment. So I can move it all the way to the, bizarrely, pushing the start button moves it to the left, and pushing the select button moves it to the right. This is so cool. Oh my gosh. I am such a perfectionist with these things. And to have this option to just press buttons to align it, instead of maybe like when I was building this one, taking things completely apart and starting all over again, this is a breath of fresh air. Although I can see myself adjusting it all the time. I want to move it up a little tiny bit. So we'll just move it up a little bit. So that's down. Select moves it up. So if anything, I would take this apart and I would wire it differently. Do the start and select in different places. It is very windy out there tonight, so apologies if my sound is a little bit messed up. Right, and then to exit, I am assuming I will do a long press on those two buttons again. There we go. And now it kind of looks a little bit funny on there, but in reality, it's super neat. It looks like a little bit blurry. If I shine the light on it, it kind of might level off the color a little bit. So we've got Game Boy Color lighting up there, and that looks really good. Let's try it with a game. Right, I've been looking for an excuse to use this Zelda DX cart, because although I have the original in black, it's kind of cool to have this in like the old style, you know, the grey cartridge to go with the grey Game Boy. So let's see this and have our first attempt at booting up a game fail. Alright, that's promising. Here we are. So this is on the retro pixel setting. This is a bit more like your authentic style. And then if I just press and hold here, we'll go back to the standard setting. There we go. So that's just like the standard screen there. So that's just a matter of personal taste, but let's just turn that lovely tune down a bit. Oh, I cannot believe how easy that was. It is getting so easy to build these things now. Like this one that I did took, I would say this took a good 2, 3, 4 hours longer than this one. That is absolutely amazing. I mean, you know, I did harvest that front panel from a broken Game Boy Advance SP, and I did buy this one for quite a bit more money. You know, the screen was, I can't remember, I'm going to have to look it up, but the screen was like 50 something pounds, and then I had to buy the case and everything else for it, but it is money well spent. That is just magnificent. Wow. I have done a lot of Game Boy mods in my time and countless Game Boy builds, but this has really, really blown me away. Not only was it probably the easiest mod I've ever had to do in terms of doing a whole build, but just how good it looks. The larger screen, the glass, the way it's done as a sealed unit so that the lens is much, much closer to the screen makes a significant difference that I didn't really expect. And with the shell, again, the quality of the shell is much, much better than I was expecting. And that's not because I thought, oh, this is going to be no good. It's from experience. A lot of the time, third-party shells and cheap Chinese shells are not great. So it's nice to get one that feels on a par
I would say, yeah, on a par with the originals. That's really impressive. The colour touch at the bottom is so nice. It would be nice to get it the same colour as the original Game Boy Color, with like the different colours on the bit where it says colour. But for me, it's the blue that I wanted, because that's like on this one here. That looks right for me. In terms of playing on it, the buttons seem to be responsive. I've not given it a good play test yet, but I'll give it a good check. I am going to be making more of these. I really enjoyed that, and I'm sorry, I should be showing you. I can't stop looking at it. It's wonderful, and I think the original DMG style is just, I mean, look at that. Is that just me? That's so cool. Right, well, I'm going to go. I'm going to go and do some playing on this. I've got a whole load of stuff I want to try out with it, and oh yeah, so I was going to say about what I bought it for, because, you know, doing this kind of mod compared to my old style DIY mods, there's a lot less work involved, but there is more money. Game Boys now are so much more expensive to get hold of than they were, and of course you need to get hold of a working Game Boy Color. Doesn't matter if the screen's broken, but you need that motherboard to be working. I spent quite a bit of time, if you watch some of my other videos, on making sure I got the power switch working, of upgrading the capacitors, but you know, it's worth making sure you've got a good motherboard first, and they can be quite expensive. In terms of the other parts I bought, the capacitor I bought, which is in the other video, was £2.77, £3.77 for my silicone inserts, £11.88 for the shell. The custom shell is essential for this screen. I would not have wanted to do all that cutting. £54.77 for the light. It seems like a random price, but these prices are fluctuating all the time. £3.96 for the buttons. Was well worth getting the Game Boy style buttons. So a total of just over £77 for all of those parts from Z Labs, and I would say it's every penny well spent with that. I am so excited. I've got more projects, more videos coming up if this shed doesn't blow down first. I've got a few more videos on the way very soon, so I'll shut up. I'll stop rambling. You can tell I'm just excited. I'm sorry. If you did like that, please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and I'll be back again soon. Bye.